And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wags across the glass.
We got lots of emails about that last segment about Evan Lowe hiring Alec Baldwin for a fundraiser. Jeff writes in at johnnydontlikeshow@gmail.com. Hey, guys, maybe Alec Baldwin went to celebrate the Lunar New Year in San Jose, thinking he'd have a chance to fire a gun in the air or at someone's face.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a columnist and the founder of the Recall DA Chesaboudin movement and host of the As Mayor podcast. You can get him online at richiegreenberg.org and follow him on X at Greenberg Nation. Richie Greenberg, welcome.
Thank you so much for bringing me on today. Happy afternoon. It's a nice, great day in San Francisco.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. Let's begin with the story that started in San Francisco and made national attention. And that is, if you are caught speeding in the city and county of San Francisco, you will pay a different fine based on your income. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. It's all true, but I need to emphasize that they don't call it a fine. It's a fee. They specify the word fee. So that is a little bit different from what we're used to seeing. But, if you go starting at 11 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, then there'll be one fee. And then if you are low income, then that fee is half price. So you're basically getting a discount. And then there are different pricing tiers depending on how fast you go, starting at about $50, then $25 if you're low income, $100 if you're going 26 miles an hour or so over the speed limit, but $50 if you're low income, all the way up to $500 fee if you are going 100 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, or $250 if you are low income.
Okay, I know that it may sound like semantics to argue over whether or not it's a fee or a fine, but typically when you're talking about fees, fees are short for user fees, and fees are something that you pay when you are using a service and benefit from it disproportionately. You're expected to pay for at least a portion of the cost of that service because you're the one that is benefiting. So, for example, if you use a municipally owned golf course, you don't pay a tee time price, you pay a fee because the city owns it. If you go to a California State University school, you pay a fee for your classes. If you go to the beach and you park there, you pay a fee to park. A fine is when you break the law and it's intended to be some kind of punishment that will alter your behavior. It'll get you from driving over the speed limit to driving at the speed limit or below the speed limit. Why is it that they're trying to regard this as a fee instead of a fine, which we all know it is?
It's really bizarre, and I agree with you. Another good example is the high occupancy HOV lanes that are on the freeways, right? You're paying a fee to use that lane. It's not a fine, it's a fee. So it's just a very strange wording, and I didn't come up with that. That was just how it's being presented. But what's also problematic, by having a two-tiered system, one for all of us hardworking, law-abiding citizenry, and we get a penalized. Well, but we understand this. We know we're speeding. We know that, and we're going to have to pay somehow for doing that. In place of having officers, traffic officers, or motorcycle cops that pull you over with a handheld radar, which seems to be a much better way to show enforcement rather than these hidden cameras. That's what they are. These are cameras in specific areas. You don't even know that they're there. They're very discreet, and I've gone through 3 or 4 of them just to get over to where I'm having a meeting this afternoon. I know where they are because I actually plotted them out. So, but anyone else wouldn't know. So it's not really even any deterrence. You just suddenly get something in the mail. So that, and you'd get a discount as well. But there's a third tier of these fees or fines or penalties. Those are the individuals that have vehicles that have stolen plates or fake plates or no plates at all on their car. It's not going to affect them at all. In fact, now they're free and clear to go through and do whatever they want, speed anywhere they want, be reckless, endangerment, anything that they want to do, and they're not worried about getting pulled over by a traffic cop because now they're relying on these kind of speed cameras.
Well, it's even worse than that, because I would imagine the owner of the car who had the car stolen, if someone is caught speeding in that car, one of the cameras catches them, they're going to mail the ticket to whoever it is that the car is registered to. And the owner, who did nothing wrong, was the victim of a crime, is going to get stuck in some kind of administrative nightmare trying to get that ticket removed.
Yes, absolutely. Ultimately, it'll be dropped for that reason when you prove that your car was stolen. But it's just an added headache. Correct. It's an added headache that we just shouldn't have to deal with.
This is so stupid on so many different levels. But first and foremost, to go back to what I said at the beginning, fines are meant to correct bad behavior. If someone is doing something that society deems to be dangerous and we want them to stop doing it, the fine is the motivator to get them to alter their behavior. But if poor people or people who are not regarded as wealthy, however you want to define them, they're getting a fine that is not what it's supposed to be because of their socioeconomic status, you're not going to alter their behavior. You're not going to manipulate how they drive the car. There's no motivation for them to follow the rules. From their point of view, they can do whatever they want because the city's going to cut them a break.
Yeah, well, there's another factor as well. Just because someone is making a standard amount of annual income and is not low income, right? That doesn't mean that they have disposable income. They just have potentially more expenses, higher level of cost of living. So that doesn't mean that someone is going to have that disposable income to go ahead and pay a fee either. So it still is very unfortunate, and I agree with you 100% that using these speed cameras does not do anything to deter the infractions and violations. They don't put points on your driver's license either. This is more like an administrative fee.
What's next? They're going to say, all right, we'll cut you a break if you have a weak bladder. Officer, I meant to go the speed limit, but I just had a big gulp, but I have to get home.
Well, but that's true as well, because it takes out any of the human interaction. If an officer was there, pulled you over, it's an emergency. I'm taking, my wife is giving birth, and okay, I'm speeding. Okay, this takes that whole thing out by having by using these automated speed cameras. So do you have to argue it? Can you argue it? That hasn't even been addressed yet.
How long do you think this dumb idea is going to last before they cut bait on it?
Well, it just started, and it's not a San Francisco thing. It was a policy and a pilot program developed with our good friends over in Sacramento, and they're in 5 of the largest cities. San Francisco was just the first one. So you're going to get it in L.A., in San Jose, San Diego, elsewhere. And so they're going to just keep this going on I think it's a 2-year pilot program. They'll see how it works, and then they'll reevaluate it.
Well, and like every other bad idea on planet Earth, this one came from the HOAs originally. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but I have friends who live in a very fancy HOA out in the La Quinta area, and they have those speed cameras all through their community. And if someone is caught speeding by one of the cameras, the HOA mails a fine to the homeowner. So you order Uber Eats or someone sends flowers to your house, whatever the case may be, and someone is driving in that development that was let in because you called it into security. If that person goes 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, the HOA mails the homeowner a fine, and they're expected to pay it.
Yeah. I'm very familiar in Orange County. I have relatives that live in something like that, or Laguna. Yeah, I can see that happening. You have to check in and give your driver the car registration, the license plate when you check in at the front gate. Wow. Yeah.
At some point, we need to defund the HOAs, but we'll get to that on a different date. We're speaking
That's
with
a different fight.
Richie Greenberg, who you can follow on X at Greenberg Nation. Richie, let's move across the bay for a second because there is a special election that is taking place on tax day, April the 15th, where voters in Oakland will be able to select a new mayor as the former mayor, Sheng Tao, who's now being investigated and charged by the feds, was removed from office by voters. It is now a two-man race where Lauren Taylor, the former councilman who ran against Sheng Tao the first time around, is considered one of the favorites. And longtime former Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who has adopted many of the same policies as Sheng Tao, she is also regarded as being one of the top two frontrunners. What do you see happening in that race?
Yeah, you summarized it pretty well. This is like the old school progressive Nancy Pelosi, which would be Barbara Lee. They are similar in age, and they've both served for decades in the House, in Congress, and they have very, very similar philosophies, very similar ideology, versus someone who's younger and sees things a lot more pragmatic. And if you just look at the three main things: public safety, homelessness, and the budget. Those are identified as being typically the three biggest problems facing Oakland. Barbara Lee wants to take the slow approach, keep things pretty much status quo, even though we know and we see national headlines that Oakland's in serious trouble. She does not support bringing more police quickly, accelerated, the way that her opponent, Lauren Taylor. He wants to have 3 police academies per year, bring up the number of sworn officers above what was recommended, and bring in technology like drones and surveillance cameras, hopefully not speed cameras. But that's his approach, and that seems a lot more what Oakland really needs. Homelessness is very similar. Barbara Lee, she wants the progressive approach, take time. We need more money. We need to address what are the underlying root causes of homelessness. Lauren Taylor is the opposite. He says we need to clear encampments ASAP and enforcement. So that's another very big difference between the two. And then budget deficit. Barbara Lee, she takes the old school progressive playbook approach. Let's keep the budget pretty much the same, the annual operating budget the same, and we need to identify new ways to bring in revenue, increase sales tax or other kinds of taxes. And Lauren Taylor's the opposite. He's like, no, we don't need to keep the kind of funding in place. We need to cut costs. So you can see there's a very big difference between the two.
So Sheng Tao drove that city into the ground, and voters decided to kick her out because of it. You look at the positions that Barbara Lee has taken on issues, whether it's the ceasefire program, whether it is the sale of the Coliseum, you name it, her positions are essentially the same as Sheng Tao. She even opposed the recall of Sheng Tao and Pamela Price in the last election. How is it that voters, or how do you think she expects voters who just voted to dump Sheng Tao because of her poor performance would then choose someone who sees the world exactly the same way as the woman they just ran out of town?
Well, it's going to take a lot of effort on Lee's side to convince the voters that she is not Sheng Tao, which obviously she's not. But when you have someone who has been a beloved, reelected over and over and over again representative, she was in Congress for 20-something years, and that's an election that is done every 2 years. So with that kind of name recognition and notoriety and face recognition and everything, This is why she can bank on that as being a reason that she could be elected now as mayor. And that would be very unfortunate, very detrimental, because every town needs change when it is so, when it's sunk so low. San Francisco, we have a new mayor, the new DA over in Oakland, Alameda County. So that is why that Lauren Taylor really has to put the message out there that a vote for Barbara Lee is a vote for the unfortunate and bad status quo, regardless of whether she was serving as mayor or not. She, like Nancy Pelosi, the darling of San Francisco, and now she's potentially the darling of Oakland. That should not be enough. That should not be the reason to go ahead and elect her, I should say, as mayor.
Last question before you go. Does anyone up there believe that Sheng Tao is going to beat the feds, or are people convinced that she's going to the clink for a long time?
No, I think almost everyone, except maybe her public, very, very small circle that will just say anything to try and keep her in the best light. I don't think anyone really is doubting now that she's facing the music.
Richie Greenberg, host of the As Mayor podcast. You can follow him on X at Greenberg Nation and get him online at richiegreenberg.org. Richie Greenberg, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you. A pleasure.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, now that we've hit the halfway point of today's show, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is go to The John Phillips Show on Apple Podcasts, The John Phillips Show on iHeart, The John Phillips Show on Spotify. Hit subscribe. You'll get all the episodes. You can also search for the podcast on our 2 radio station websites, KABC.com or KSFO.com. They're right there. Either way, you're going to get all the episodes of The John Phillips Show, which you're going to want to load up your phone, because you don't want to be in a situation where you got nothing to listen to and you end up listening to Pamela Price's podcast instead.
She called me a crime boss.
In the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
Let's do that right now. 790 KABC welcomes Gilby Clark to the Canyon in Agora Hills on April 19th. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com. But right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-795-2222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by the Canyon, where music meets the soul. Good luck dialing.
And coming up next week, we're going on the road.
We're going back to Long Beach, everybody. This is so exciting. Last November, we went to Long Beach at Gladstone's, and it was one of the best remotes we've ever done, and we knew we had to do it again. We're going to be celebrating the 20th anniversary of Gladstone's Long Beach and the 50th anniversary of the Long Beach Grand Prix. Join us Friday, April 11th from noon to 3 for Fan Free Friday. We're going to be broadcasting live from the beautiful patio right on the Rainbow Harbor in Long Beach. It's gorgeous. The view is amazing, and so is the food. I could go for some of those poke nachos. Gladstone's Long Beach is a great location for a date night, delicious get-together with friends, a sunset cocktail, family meals, and celebrations. Gladstone's Long Beach, located directly across from the Pike Shopping Center. Make a reservation and join us next Friday, and look for Gladstone San Diego at Seaport Village this fall.
The FAIR Plan is the insurance policy of last resort here in the state of California. You buy the FAIR Plan if you get turned down by State Farm and Allstate and even Adriana. Usually you end up on the FAIR Plan if you live in an area like Big Bear or Lake Arrowhead, some area that's clearly at extreme fire risk and no one wants to take you on. It's very expensive, and it's hard to get any money out of them if you are the victim of a fire or you need to be made whole for some act of God. And, Randy, as it turns out, the FAIR Plan is worse at making payouts than we initially thought.
Well, it's all in the name, right? If they call it the FAIR Plan, you know what it's not. The FAIR Plan is dealing with the claims process of victims of the Eden Fire and the Palisades Fire. And it turns out if, let's say, your home didn't burn down, but it's massively damaged by smoke and ash and soot and all of that, the FAIR Plan says, here's a broom, clean it up yourself.
What are you supposed to do if that happens to your house? Who wants to live in a house that smells like Lucille Ball's lungs?
Here is one Palisades resident that spoke to ABC7 in the Bay Area about the nightmare that's going on.
High levels of harmful chemicals like arsenic and lead are being reported in areas that were destroyed by the Los Angeles County wildfires.
It's the result of charred homes built before the 1970s. Well, now it's raising questions about another hurdle in the state's insurance crisis.
Karen Bass also admitted on a podcast that I listened to yesterday that part of the reason there's so much toxic material in the Palisades is everyone had a Tesla.
7 on your side, Stephanie Sierra investigates. And what have you been able to uncover?
Well, you know, these stories are both heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time. We're talking about families whose homes are still standing, but their entire neighborhood in the Pacific Palisades is gone. In some cases, their roof melted off.
What do you even do with that, by the way? If everyone around you, their homes burned down, your grocery store burned down, your church burned down, your kid's school burned down, all your friends' homes burned down, your mailbox burned down, but the actual structure of your house is still there, albeit it smells like an ashtray. Who would want to live there? Would you want to live there where it looks like the day after the world ended?
Well, and that neighborhood probably won't be rebuilt for 5 to 10 years. So what do? Sit and wait, or do you sell to Blackstone and get out of there?
Well, and isn't the water contaminated too?
They've fixed the water. They fixed the power. But there's still a lot of toxic material in the area.
What do you think the cell reception is like?
In some cases, their roof melted off and their bedroom is covered in arsenic. Yet the state's...
Yep, that sounds like a fun place to live.
Great, arsenic. Isn't that what put one of the women in prison on Chicago?
Yet the state's insurer of last resort denies their coverage to address it, and the reason why may surprise you.
As the Pacific Palisades fire ripped through Travis Landrum's neighborhood, his first home purchase, filled with family memories, went from this to this. His home, one of the few that narrowly avoided the flames.
So my house is still standing. The house directly behind me, that house burned down.
Feeling lucky at the time, little did he know the nightmare he would walk into.
The back of my house kind of melted. The windows are melted, the stucco.
So it didn't completely burn down, but his house is not livable.
No, and let's be honest. If you're involved in an automobile accident that doesn't turn your car into a tin can, but there's serious damage to it, what they regard as a car being totaled doesn't necessarily have to be death and destruction. It's just going to cost a fortune to get it back to the way it used to be. In many ways, these homes are quote-unquote totaled the way you would regard a car that was involved in an accident. In certain respects, it's almost worse to be in this guy's position than to have the home burned down. Because if the home burned down, everyone acknowledges that the home burned down and you need to be made whole and you need to move somewhere else. But if the home looks normal, but everything is funky because of the fire, what do you do with that? You know the insurance company is going to screw you over, and you don't want to live in that mess, but it looks fine.
Are melted. The stucco is messed up. The roof, the gutter, everything in my backyard burned.
His landscaping fried, the window frames melting off, the trampoline cooked, and inside...
The trampoline!
Don't go bouncing.
And inside, soot and ash covering the floors. According to his insurer, the California Fair Plan, smoke damage is only covered if it's a direct physical loss, meaning it's visible to the unaided eye or detectable by smell. Yet
that is quite the clause.
I'm telling you, and I say this as someone who has no legal training and is not an attorney, if your home burned down in the fire and you have to try to get money out of your insurance company, I would hire an attorney who knows about this to be your advocate and to be your go-between between you and the insurance company, because they are going to try to rip you off.
Well, and especially the Fair Plan, which was created as a conglomerate of all the other insurance companies when they didn't want to insure anything after the Watts riots in South L.A. And now it is the dumping ground for all the policies they don't want to write, because even though they're still technically liable for them, they get a lot more premium. They don't have to worry about bad PR because everyone hates the Fair Plan. And they don't have to pay out your claims if they feel like they don't want to, because what's Ricardo Lara going to do about it?
Something tells me the only people who ever make out okay with insurance claims are fraudsters.
There's plenty of that.
Yet despite clear evidence his home was affected, The FAIR Plan didn't think so.
There's a line item in the policy that says smoke damage, here's what we cover. And then it's immediately, they don't cover smoke damage.
Well, wait a minute. If there's a large fire, smoke damage is kind of assumed, right?
Yes, but the FAIR Plan is trying to get out of making this guy whole. Even though his house didn't burn completely down, it's obviously not livable or safe right now.
But the smoke came from the fire,
yes,
which the policy does cover. No fire, no smoke.
So what did he get instead?
Basically, all they provide you is a couple $100 for hydroxyl, which is, I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of it.
It's a mixture of chemicals that's supposed to get rid of the smoke smell. The FAIR Plan sent him
So they're giving him a couple $100 for rug deodorant?
I wonder if they gave him any of those air fresheners that look like Jesus.
The FAIR Plan sent him a list of 13 tasks to get done. But here's the catch. They only provided an allowance for a technician to clean all the toxins from his house in 1 hour.
Wait a minute. The costliest fire in the history of the United States, the largest fire in the history of LA County, and they're willing to pay someone for exactly 60 minutes to come clean up the mess.
I mean, this is the crux of the California insurance crisis. So many people were kicked off their policies. They have no other option but the FAIR Plan. And what do we know about the FAIR Plan? It is expensive and the coverage is terrible.
Well, hearing all of this stuff makes me think these people should have gone with Flo.
They would if they could.
I can't believe they're telling people 1 hour. That's crazy.
We brought the list the FAIR Plan sent to Landrum to the chief of occupational environmental medicine at UCSF. Gina Solomon has 3 decades of experience studying toxic chemicals, including in the aftermath of the Camp Fire in Paradise and Hurricane Katrina. Solomon says she found several flaws in the FAIR Plan's approach to cleanup.
The things that I see on here worries me, which is a solid odor counteractant. That's basically just like spraying deodorant over the toxic chemicals.
Yeah, that's really not going to save your family or make them not get sick from all the toxicity in there.
No, it's not. And don't forget this. When 9/11 happened and the first responders and the construction workers and everyone went in to clean up the mess and build a new building, how many of them ended up with cancer? How many of them ended up dying as young men and women because they got some kind of tropical disease from all of those chemicals in the rubble?
It was a lot of them. And Congress from both Democrat and Republican administrations did very little to help those people until they were forced to.
And you look at the destruction in the Pacific Palisades in Altadena and Malibu, and you're dealing with many of the same chemicals. You're dealing essentially with a ball of fire and the remnants of it.
So that's not going to do anything to help anybody.
Landrum got professional estimates to clean and remove debris and take care of fire-retardant mold, soot, ash, and smoke. That would cost him roughly $70,000. Yet after his deductible, the FAIR Plan adjusters only offered him $625.
It's just ridiculous.
This is a scam, and it's a scam that is being completely allowed by Ricardo Lara.
I'm very kind of sketchy.
Yeah, why the hell isn't that guy down in Pacific Palisades having press conferences day after day?
Well, there's a conference in Bermuda.
Oh, yes. He just got a new Speedo, too. Right now, we're learning how fire victims are being re-victimized yet again by the FAIR Plan.
Let's go back to ABC 7 in the Bay Area.
$625.
This guy had an estimate done for how much he would need to be able to get all the toxic chemicals, fix the roof, fix the lining, fix all the other things in his house, and they said $70,000. The FAIR Plan said here's $600.
And they said someone could do it in an hour.
$625.
Is that a joke? Like, it's not even, I mean, it's just offensive.
And to add insult to injury,
and we have elevated levels of lead in the house.
turns out Landrum isn't alone.
6 billion pounds of toxic material was released. When it came to these fires, 10,000 structures were in the fire zone that remain. Those structures are contaminated with toxic materials.
Attorney Brian.
Yeah, every single house that didn't burn down is going to need almost a complete remodel.
I hate saying this because I know for these families who have been displaced, their home is their life. Memories are there. Children were born. People died. Those sorts of things. But at a certain point, this process, it's clear, this process is going to go on forever. For your peace of mind, for your sanity, you just have to move on.
Attorney Brian Ailstock represents hundreds of homeowners affected by the Palisades fire, where he says testing found toxins like lead and arsenic were 22 times above the EPA's limit. And in Altadena, he says more than half the homes tested had exceedingly high levels of lead.
And the FAIR Plan doesn't care about any of that?
Of course not.
There is no safe limit when it comes to children and lead.
It's like the FAIR Plan is a way for the insurance companies who have to buy into the FAIR Plan to do all the things they wish they could do, but they'd get backlash for with State Farm or with Allstate or any of these other companies. But because it's the FAIR Plan and everyone already hates it, they can screw over anybody that's on it.
Well, and insurance is an industry that's one of the most heavily regulated industries in the state. And then you look at what the FAIR Plan is doing here and you say to yourself, and that's a joke.
When it comes to children and lead, these homes are simply uninhabitable. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, is that insurance companies aren't stepping up to the plate. They're using technicalities like direct physical loss or to say, no, we're not going to pay for the remediation that clearly is necessary.
Last month, California's Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara issued a bulletin directing all insurers, including the FAIR Plan, to thoroughly investigate and process smoke damage claims.
And they didn't.
And they just totally ignored him. And because he's not here doing his job, they were able to get away with it.
And then they invited him to another conference.
But the bulletin appears to just list legal obligations and guidance on best practices. And some, like Travis, are saying it doesn't appear to be working.
When you think about, my daughter and my son who have to go back to their bedrooms and put their head on a pillow that could contain toxic lead, I can't live with that.
Now,
the insurance commissioner, by the way, with that letter, was not intending to actually change policy or force the insurance companies to fulfill their obligations. What he was intending on doing with that letter was checking a box so he could say, see, I did something.
Now, according to initial research from the California Institute of Technology, homes that were properly cleaned had toxic levels reduced by 100-fold. So as Solomon explained, the cleaning does work, but in some cases, the study also found that toxic waste was still prevalent even after cleaning, and had some experts warn homes will still have to be torn down. And as we look forward,
we're going to see, as much of a construction nightmare as already is just to build the homes that burn down, you might have to see every single home that stood standing has to be completely torn down as well.
If you owned a home in Pacific Palisades that burned down or dealt with that kind of smoke, would you go back or would you move on?
I'd move.
Yeah, me too.
Down. And as we look forward here, of course, there's questions as to why the commissioner's bulletin isn't being enforced.
Well, look at the commissioner.
He cannot wait for his term to expire so he can move on to some other office and hand a plate full of problems to the next guy.
Do you think when he goes to sleep at night, he's thinking about these homeowners that are getting screwed over by the FAIR Plan and he's doing nothing about it? Or do you think he goes to sleep at night thinking about the next time he gets to go see DJ Kitty Glitter?
I think he regards them as being a pain in the ass.
Right.
Yeah. Well, at least they have a whole hour to clean up. That's got to be comforting.
Surprising.
It's called the FAIR Plan. Yeah, the FAIR Plan. Is this been kind of hashed out? Like, what are people evaluating this?
Well, it's called the insurer of last resort for a reason, right? But in terms of their past, it's not a pretty picture. I can tell you, a spring market conduct exam took place a couple years ago, and it found that the plan allegedly snuck illegal changes through the regulatory process, and CDI.
Shocker!
They seem to get away with that regularly.
Plan allegedly snuck illegal changes through the regulatory process, and CDI approved them. And they found there was a stunning lack of transparency. So there's a lot of questions about how they operate.
Oh, boy. All right. Thanks, Steph.
There you go. The FAIR Plan screwing over homeowners left and right. The ones that were lucky enough to not have their house burned down, who still have damage, they can't get payouts. And Ricardo Lara is nowhere.
If this is what the FAIR Plan offers you when your house is damaged in a fire or damaged by smoke, what's the point of even being insured?
It's to check a box to say that you have insurance because you need it for your mortgage. That's all it is for. You can't use it because they'll drop you. And if you try to actually get a claim going, they're going to do this to you.